So India, totally free of Naxalism by March 2026. Ambitious, right? I mean, when I first heard that goal, it really made me think like, wow, that's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, no, it is. And for anyone listening who's, deep in their UPSC studies,
Mm.
this is one of those topics that it keeps coming up, right?
Yeah.
Internal security, government response, it's a big deal.
Absolutely. And that's why we're doing this deep dive today. We want to go past those quick headlines and sound bites and actually see what's going on. We've been digging into the government's own documents, mainly PIB, to really get into their strategy, where this whole Naxalism thing even started and what progress they say they're making.
Yeah.
So to get this all organized, we're gonna break it down into three main parts. First up, we're going to untangle the government's multi-pronged approach. We'll be looking at how they're combining development initiatives, security operations, and the legal stuff. Then we'll dive into the history, the socio-economic factors that have fueled Naxalism for decades. And last but not least, we'll examine the progress the government says it's making towards this ambitious 2026 goal. It's a lot to cover. But by the end, you'll have a clear understanding. And, UPSC aspirants, this is gold for your prelims and mains prep.
Totally. And, starting off with the strategy itself, it's really important to understand that the Indian Constitution has this division of powers, right? Like under the 7th schedule, police and public order, that's mainly a state government responsibility.
Yeah, right. So we're not talking about the central government just taking over everything.
Right, not at all.
It's more about guiding, coordinating through, they have this national policy and action plan, to address left-wing extremism, came out back in 2015.
Exactly. And that plan has, several key pillars, but development is a major one. It's really the understanding that just sending in security forces, that's not going to solve deeply rooted socioeconomic issues.
Makes sense. You got to get at the root of it, right?
Yeah, and one of the most interesting ways they're doing this is through these really targeted development initiatives. For example, take the Road Connectivity Project. It's part of the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana II.
Oh, I've heard of that one, yeah.
Well, it does a couple of things. It improves transportation for the people living in those regions, obviously.
Right.
But it also makes it much easier for security forces to access those areas. So, it's a win-win.
That's clever, like a two birds, one stone kind of thing.
Exactly.
And there's also the ROSHN scheme, right? Isn't that focused on giving young people in these, often pretty marginalized districts, real training and employment opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole idea is to give them a chance, a viable alternative, a way out, if you will. And it's not just ROSHNI. There are new industrial training institutes and skill development centers popping up right in the heart of these LWE-affected districts.
So they don't have to leave their communities to find opportunities.
Right. It's about bringing the resources to them.
And then there's education. I mean, you can't talk about development without talking about education. And this is where the Eklavya model residential schools come in, the EMRS, right?
Oh, absolutely. Those are huge.
I think I read something like 130 of them are already running in tribal blocks. It's a serious push to give those kids quality education.
It is. It really is. And you can't forget the digital side of things either. The Universal Service Obligation Fund scheme, or what they're calling it now, Digital Farat Nidhi, they're putting serious money into setting up mobile towers in these areas.
I mean, better communication, that's game-changing, both for people living there and for coordinating any kind of security response.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And then you have those tribal youth exchange programs organized by Nehru Vyasa Kendra Sangathan. I think that's a crucial piece of the puzzle because it's about direct engagement, building connections between often isolated communities and the rest of the country.
Fostering that sense of belonging.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, but now, let's shift gears a bit. We talked about development, but security is still a major part of the government's strategy. I mean, we can't deny that.
Right. We've seen some pretty large-scale operations like Operation Green Hunt. And there's a lot of those Central Armed Police Forces, CAPFs, working alongside the state police. It's a big presence.
It is. And it's not just about numbers, They're deploying these specialized units like Cobra, the Commando Battalion for Resolute Action.
Oh, yeah. The guys trained for those really tough jungle warfare type situations.
Yeah.
And the Greyhounds, they operate in states like Andhra Pradesh, right?
Exactly. Those are highly trained units specifically for dealing with insurgency in those really challenging terrains. It's about having a sustained security presence in that whole red corridor zone.
I mean, even the number of fortified police stations has gone way up. Like from just 66 in 2014 to over 600 in 2024. That's a huge increase. It's like they're creating these strong points, projecting authority in those areas.
Exactly. It's about establishing a real presence,
Yeah.
a sense of control.
Okay, so we've talked about development, security, but there's a third piece to this puzzle, right? The legal framework.
Right. You've got legislation like the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act or USEA. They've used that to ban Naxalite organizations trying to disrupt their operations, make
Right.
it harder to recruit.
Yeah, and then there are laws designed to protect the rights of people in these areas, like the Forest Rights Act back in 2006. This was and still is so important for securing the rights of tribal communities, their rights over forest produce. That was always a huge point of conflict.
Absolutely. And the Panchayat's extension to Scheduled Areas Act, PISA, from 1996, that's another one that empowers those tribal Gram Sabas, gives them more say in local governance, managing their resources.
So it's about giving them a real voice in what happens to their land, their lives.
Exactly, trying to correct those historical injustices.
And I think we have to mention the surrender-cum-rehabilitation policy, right? Because, well, offering financial help, job training, a chance to reintegrate back into society, that can be a powerful incentive for people to leave the Naxalite movement behind.
Oh, for sure. It's offering a way out of that cycle of violence.
So with all these different strategies in play, what kind of progress are we actually seeing? I mean, this is where those hard numbers come in, right? And for our UPSC folks, this is the kind of stuff you got to know.
Yeah, and the government is reporting some pretty, significant changes. They say the number of districts that are considered LWE affected, well, that's gone down from 126 in 2014 to just 12 in 2024.
Wow, that's a big drop.
It is, on paper at least, right?
Yeah, and it's not just the districts. They're also reporting fewer Naxal-related incidents overall, down from over 16,000 in the 10 years before 2014 to 7,700 in the 10 years after. So again, a pretty steep decline if you look at the figures.
Yeah, and maybe the most important thing, the number of casualties, that's down too. They're saying 73% fewer casualties among the security forces and a 70% drop in civilian casualties. So if those numbers are accurate, it seems like things are getting less violent, which is good.
Definitely. And those fortified police stations, I bet those are helping with that. But yeah, it's like you were saying before, it's important to remember that this is the government's data, right? So for our listeners, especially those prepping for the UPSC, being able to analyze those numbers, understand how they collected the data, all that stuff, that's really important.
Absolutely. You can't just take those numbers at face value.
Right.
To really evaluate the progress,
Yeah.
you have to understand the issue itself, and that means defining Naxalism. So what is it? It's a form of left-wing extremism, very much inspired by Maoist ideology.
Okay, so we're talking about a group that's trying to, overthrow the government, right? Through armed rebellion using guerrilla tactics and violence.
Exactly. They want to replace the existing system with something completely different, and they're willing to fight for it. And the name itself, Naxalism, has an interesting origin story. It comes from this village in West Bengal, Naxal-free. Back in 1967, there was this big peasant uprising against landlords who were exploiting them.
So one village, one event gave its name to this whole movement, and that's fascinating to me.
It is. It shows you how a single spark can really ignite something much bigger. And to really get this whole thing, you have to understand what led people to embrace this ideology in the first place. And landlessness, exploitation, that's a big part of it. Unequal land distribution, these powerful landlords, moneylenders, middlemen, they were taking advantage of people, especially in rural and tribal areas.
And that created a lot of resentment.
Oh, absolutely. It was a breeding ground for discontent. And then you have, poverty and lack of development in these regions, not enough healthcare, education, jobs. People are desperate, and when someone comes along promising radical change, promising a better future, well, they're more likely to listen.
Right. It's like if you have nothing to lose, right?
Exactly. And then there's this whole other layer, tribal alienation. When tribal communities are pushed off their land for industrial projects, mining, whatever, often without being properly compensated or resettled, that creates a huge sense of injustice, fuels anger and distrust towards the government. And that, historically, has been a big driver of these Naxalite movements.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you can't ignore the role of the government itself, or the lack of effective governance in some of these places. When people feel abandoned, when basic services aren't there, when they see, unfortunately, things like police brutality, well, that just makes things worse, right?
Absolutely. And there have been documented cases of police excesses, even custodial deaths. It's a complex interplay of factors. And for those of you studying for the UPSC, this is something you'll definitely want to analyze in depth.
Definitely, lots to unpack there. Okay, so zooming back in on the movement itself, the main organization we hear about is the Communist Party of India, Maoist.
Yeah, the CPI, Maoist. That's the big one, the one behind most of the violence we've seen, formed when two other Maoist groups merged.
And the government has officially banned them under the UAPA, right? So they're not messing around.
Right, they're considered a serious threat. And geographically, this whole thing, it's mainly concentrated in what they call the Red Corridor, right?
Yep.
That stretches across parts of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, Maharashtra, Bihar, those states.
Right. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've looked at the government's strategy, the progress they say they're making, and really tried to understand where this whole Naxalite movement came from, what fuels it.
And it all circles back to that goal, a Naxal-free India by March 2026.
Ooh.
It's a bold goal, a big goal, and one that could really change things for the country.
It definitely makes you think about how complex this issue is. It's not just about military operations. It's about addressing deep-seated inequalities, promoting development, and building trust. It's a long game.
For sure. And for all of you out there getting ready for the UPSC, this topic, it hits on so many important themes. Governance, security, social justice, economic development, it's all connected. And using sources like PID, that's key for your prep.
It is. And if you're finding these deep dives helpful, please do us a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate your support. And don't forget to leave us a comment below. Tell us what you think. What other topics you want us to explore?
Absolutely. And just as a reminder, the main source for all the info we've been talking about today, that's the Press Information Bureau, or PIB. It's the government's official take on this whole situation.
Right. So as we wrap up, here's a question for everyone listening. India's pushing for this Naxal-free nation by 2026, but what do you think are the biggest challenges still left to overcome? What will it take to create a truly peaceful and just India where nobody has to fear violence like this?
It's a tough question, but an important one, especially as you continue your UPSC journey and, well, just as you think about the future of India itself.